Hey everyone, welcome back and welcome to Chapter 2. So in this first section of Chapter 2, what I'm going to do is give you an introduction to Tinkercad as well as we're going to wire our first circuit. So to start, you can see here that I'm in my Tinkercad dashboard. And if you're having trouble getting here, if you haven't made an account yet, I highly recommend you go back if you haven't already, watch section 1.2 where I go over making an account. And if you're having trouble finding this page, because it should open immediately after you signed up and created an account, you can head over to tinkercad.com/dashboard. So now that you're here, the first thing that I like to do is head over to the Designs tab. And here you can see is where I have anything that I make, basically, in Tinkercad. And obviously we're going to be working with circuits, and, well, I don't have any circuits. So the first thing that we need to go ahead and do is make one. So I'm going to go ahead and hit that Create button right here, and we're going to be creating a circuit. Now here we've got a whole bunch of things going on, and it might seem overwhelming at first, but I'm going to take some time and show you all every single part that you need to be aware of. So the first thing is this sort of name that you see up here. Now this is the name of your project, and by default, Tinkercad doesn't name it like Untitled or Untitled parentheses 1 or something like that. It's this weird sort of randomized name that they give you. And I don't know about you, but I don't know what a fantastic blur snagit is. So I'm just going to click on it and rename it to, let's say, I don't know, I'll call it 2.1 circuit. You can call it whatever you want, though. Okay, so now that we've got that naming out of the way, you'll see this sort of ribbon up here of different kind of tools. And the first 5 tools should look kind of straightforward. You've got a delete, we've got a copy, we've got a paste, undo, and redo. Those are kind of things you'd see on like Google Docs or Microsoft Word. Fairly straightforward. The next thing that we have are these sort of notes that we could add to our circuit, and I'll show you how that works a little bit later, as well as all the rest of these tools that we see in the ribbon. Then we've got 3 different buttons up here. I'm going to show you this one at the end, but we're not going to worry about the other 2 for now. And then finally on the right, we've got the star of the show, which is all of our components. Now the first thing that I like to do is change the basic to all. And you'll see why this is important as you progress throughout the course and start working with, more complicated circuitry. But for now, I'm going to leave it as all. So now that we've sort of gone over, all the basic overview of all the things that Tinkercad has, let's actually start using them so we become more familiar with them. So obviously the first question that we ask ourselves is, well, what exactly are we going to be wiring up? What is the first circuit that we start with? And, well, if you've done coding before, you know that usually the first line of code involves printing out hello world. So if you're familiar with coding, like what is that hello world moment for circuitry? And the answer is an LED. Yep, it's just this tiny light that we're going to be working with. Now, obviously, in order to get an LED to light up, you need some kind of a power source, right? And so we need a battery. That's what we're going to be working with as our power source. Now, what I like to do in Tinkercad is instead of scrolling through this seemingly infinite list of things that they have to offer, I just like to search the word battery because of software, we can literally just search for the component that we want. Obviously, if you're working with a physical kit, you don't really have that luxury, right? So instead, we can just search for battery, and the battery that we're going to be working with is this 1.5 volt battery right here. Now, you'll notice that when I dragged it, in order to actually drag it over, you need to click on the battery, and then it pops up over here. So now, when you bring it into your sort of playground here, you'll notice that this menu at the top right pops up. This menu is actually going to be pretty important because it allows us to configure this battery, and it'll allow you to configure your future components. So the first thing is that you can give it a name. Let's just for now call it 1.5 volt battery. I don't really care what you name your things, or even if you name them, because I find more value in you being able to literally look at something and identify what's going on versus needing to click on something and then reading the name. So I'm not going to be too stringent on naming things and stuff like that. The next thing that we have as an option to configure is the number of batteries that we would like. For now, we've got one. We can go all the way up to 4 if you wanted to, which I think is pretty cool. But for now, we're just going to stick with one, keep it basic. And you could even switch between AA and AAA if you really wanted to. We're going to stick with AA for now. And again, all of this configuration will depend on the circuit that you make, right? So you just want to make sure that, if someone gives you a circuit to make and it says, hey, I need 3 AAA batteries in a pack, well, you know how to configure it. And lastly, you can choose if you want to have a switch in the battery pack. So when we eventually go ahead and start working with the circuit to turn on LED, if you want to switch to turn on the battery, that's also an option. For now, we're just going to get rid of it and work with the default setup that we have. All right, so we've got our battery, so let's talk a little bit about it. First of all, you'll notice that there's this plus and minus, and that's indicative of a positive end and a negative end. Now, for those of you who have seen or, maybe taken a look at some batteries before, you might be thinking like, hey, wait a second. Isn't like the positive end of a battery usually on like maybe this side of the battery, and then the negative end is all the way on this side of the battery? And you'd be 100% correct. Because this battery is sort of in this battery housing, this sort of black housing you see around the battery, what's going on is like the positive and negative ends are being brought to one side. And we can see it right here with these 2 pins, where we've got a positive end with this sort of red housing, and a negative end, or a negative pin rather, in this black housing. So, and this housing, if you're curious, is kind of like those things in the back of your TV remotes that you insert batteries into, when you take off the cover and put in the batteries. It's kind of like the same thing, except the only thing that this is doing is, instead of powering a TV remote, it's just rerouting your positive and negative ends to the top over here. So that's really what's going on with this. So we've got our battery, and we've got our power source for our LED. Now, the only thing that's missing is our LED, right? So what we're going to do is go ahead and grab our LED. Now, you'll see that when I type in LED, we get like all these different kind of things, but we're just going to be worried about this guy right here. So this is our LED. Now, when I click and drag it over to my workspace or playground here, you'll notice that, like the battery pack, I can give it a name, and, you might find this useful for working with different kinds of LEDs. But what I think is a lot cooler is you can actually change the color of the LED. So if you want a red LED, you could just leave that as default. You can actually go to white. You could go to blue. You could go to orange. You could go to yellow. And you could go to green. You could pick your favorite color. I'm going to stick with the default red, not white. I want red. There we go. Okay. So now we see these 2 pins on the LEDs, and well, we've got 2 pins on the battery, so maybe you can see where they were kind of going with this, but I first want to talk about these 2 pins. So you see how I kind of hovered over the battery here, and it says positive and negative? Well, I can do the same thing with the LED, except when I hover over it, I see the word anode on this like bendy bit here, and I see the word cathode on this sort of straight pin here. Now, what the heck does that mean? I mean, I thought we were just working with positive and negative here. Well, these are actually just fancier circuitry terms for positive and negative. So this anode here is positive, and the cathode here is negative. Now, another thing to keep in mind, or I guess, think about is, well, why is one of these guys, the cathode, straight, and well, why is the other one like bent up like that? And the real reason for that is, well, if you look at the battery here, without hovering over, the pins, how do we know which one is positive and which one is negative? Well, it's because this one over here is red, and this one over here is black. So red, by our convention of circuitry wiring, means positive, and black means negative. So with that, you'll notice that the pins on the LEDs aren't actually different colors. So what we do in order to distinguish it, and I guess what Tinkercad does by default, is it bends the anode or the positive pin so that we can easily differentiate it. So without hovering, I could be like, okay, I know this guy is the anode or the positive end because it's bent, and yes, we can confirm that. And I know because this guy is straight, it's the cathode. So that's how we know, all right, this guy's the anode, this guy's the cathode. this guy's a positive end over here, this guy's a negative end over here, because one is bent and one is straight. So there's your sort of visual differentiator there. Now the next thing that we need to do is actually wire this up, right? So what we're going to do in Tinkercad, wiring is actually pretty straightforward. So all you're going to do is click on the negative terminal, and you'll see like we get this sort of animation that like, okay, we're ready to send power to something. That's exactly what we're going to do. So we're going to take this and we're going to drag it all the way up to the cathode. And that's pretty much it. Now, one thing that you'll notice is this color of the wire is green. And I don't know about you, but if this battery's negative end is black, I would want my wire to also be black so I can, visually see like, all right, this is the negative end. And so that's exactly what we're going to do. So in order to change the color of your wire, you first want to click on the wire you want to change the color of. And then you're going to go up here and click on this guy, which is wire color. We've got a whole bunch of different options, but we're going to do it black because the negative side of this battery is black, so I want the wire to match. Now there we go. There is the negative end of the LED wired. Now the next thing that we're going to do is do the same thing for the positive end or the anode of the LED. So I'm going to take my wire, click on the positive end, slide it up, and wire it to the anode. Now obviously this wire is black, which we don't like in this case because it doesn't follow our convention. So we're going to click on this and then change it to red. So now we're following this sort of convention, right? We've got black here and we've got red here. The black wire indicates I'm connecting the negative end of the battery to the cathode of the LED. And the red end of the battery and the red wire indicates that I'm connecting the positive end of the battery to the anode of the LED. Now you might be wondering, like, hey, I just wired this successfully. Like, what's going on? Why isn't my LED turning on? Well, that brings us to this button over here called Start Simulation. So Tinkercad by default won't actually immediately start powering things. You have to hit that Start Simulation button in order for something to actually happen. And this something that we want to happen is we want our battery to give power to our LED. So we're going to hit Start Simulation. And immediately you'll see the LED changes and it looks like it's being lit up. So I'm going to sort of repeat that here so you can see. Start. I'm going to stop it. I'm going to start it. It lights up. I'm going to stop it. I'm going to start it. It lights up and I'm going to stop it. So you can see here that, well, now I've got an LED fully wired up to a battery. Isn't that pretty cool? So let's sort of take a recap before we end our video here. So we made a new circuit in Tinkercad. We renamed it over here. We've got a whole bunch of tools here that allow us to customize our circuit and, sort of work with our elements. I can add a note here. Let's say LED connected to 1.5 volt battery. Oops, battery. Okay, cool. Now, this button just hides the notes if you don't want to see it, because sometimes if you have a lot of notes, it might clutter up your workspace. So having a button to clear it is nice. If you just hit that button again, now it becomes visible and you can see it. If you click on this button, it minimizes it. If you click on the note, it maximizes it. That's just something to know if you like to annotate on sort of what's going on. I highly recommend that. I think it's a nice practice, especially when we're getting started. And then we changed our component section to view all of them, and we used the nifty search feature in order to find what we're looking for. And you can actually use Control F just like a, sort of like a normal PDF or a Google Doc that you're looking through, which is, I think is kind of cool. So if I type in battery, we figured out our battery, or we found it rather, and if I type in LED, we found our LED. And remember, we can click on the components to configure them. So if I wanted to change this LED to say blue and then turn it on, there we go. I've got a blue LED lit up. So that about covers everything I wanted to go over in this video. Thank you so much for watching, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video where we dig a little bit deeper into what's going on with this LED circuit here. Thanks so much.